a Beachhead Advantage podcast, forging new markets. This second podcast from Beachhead Advantage is a further conversation addressing deeper issues. From Sydney, with your Australian Comprador CJ Warrick.
Well, we spoke of the 654 odd ways that directors can be personally liable for obligations that pierce the corporate veil, and that's true. Many of them are in areas like HR, etc., but there's several that keep me up at night from my dozens of clients that do have employees, and so the primary one, I guess, that comes to mind, which is not as common in other countries, is that we have a mandatory super being an abbreviation for superannuation, which is the equivalent of what would be called a pension in the UK, or what would be RRSPs in North America. And not only, however, is it mandatory for companies to pay, now I think it's up to 10.5% of the base salary, but it is highly, highly illegal to fail to pay that. It's more illegal almost than killing them. And so if they do not follow their obligations with regards to their super or their superannuation commitments, mandatory SG, superannuation guarantee, that's a jailable offence, and it can quickly result in a director's penalty notification, and that's a director's liability, not the company's liability. So that's a concern that concerns me on a regular basis, but is possibly different and unheard of in the countries where our typical clients come from. In the larger sphere of things that they need to be aware of is, whilst we definitely punch above our weight, we have a population of just over 25 million, which is kind of like the population of the larger Los Angeles. And so it can take longer to get to market here. It can take longer to get traction here in market because it is a smaller population on a larger continent. Not quite as large as Canada, but almost as large as the mainland United States, which surprises people. So people should be aware that they should factor that into their market entry plans. So FDI is welcome here. The federal government, Austrade, many of the states have active teams encouraging companies to come to Australia. And so their mission is to convince you of the benefit and the successes that can be made in the Australian market, and that is true. And we all believe it as well. But the concern that I would have is make sure that you're coming in with an understanding that things may take time, that there are rules here that you may not be aware of, and it is good to sample the opinions of a number of people before you make your final decision. I think we're relatively easy on the world scale of countries to enter. Australia is not in the bottom of that league. We're probably in the top 10. We make things more difficult. We have foibles, not fickle nature in the ATO and some of our Australian laws. The commitment is real. People do want to have companies enter the Australian market, but they need to know how to do it the right way, because you can get caught out quite easily by misunderstanding that this market is not the same, it is not regulated the same as your home market. You have to be patient, and I think you need to listen to the advice, whether that's advice from Beachhead or whether that's advice from your trade counsellors and trade commissions that are encouraging you to come here, or whether that's advice from other professional services providers, accountants and lawyers, etc. So you ignore them at your peril. This is a booming country. We're on an ascendancy, not a trajectory, not a descent. Our population is growing. We have a vast expanse of country in which to put people and expand. It is a boom market for many, many sectors, not just the ones that you think about, like mining and minerals and what have you. Our second largest market here in Australia, even I was surprised to find this out, is education, higher level education. So there's all kinds of, it's like having a brand new market that's on your doorstep but 5,000 miles away that speaks the same language. So it is not the same as moving from one state in the United States to another, or one province in Canada to another, or one county in the United Kingdom to another. It is a whole new country, and if you can establish your presence and your product here, that's a great start, because you'll be ahead of any number of other people who are afraid to step into the market. Our typical target sweet spot client is probably someone who, or some company that is between, say, 5 million and 200 million in their home market. They're established. That doesn't mean they need to have been going for 10 years, but they need to have some level of maturity in having established their product or service and their business. We're expecting them to arrive as a greenfield site in Australia with next to no revenue and next to no headcount. So that's the sweet spot is defined more by the parent than what they're anticipating setting up as the child. We specialize in nothing other than setting up new operations for foreign direct investors entering the market. And so we kind of know who is going to be keen on engaging the nature of our services, and so that creates the sweet spot of their revenue between 5 and 200. Under 5, they are going to think they can do it themselves. They're right. That'll just take longer, and they'll make more mistakes. Over 200, there'll probably be a company that has a market entry team dedicated to entering new markets. I worked with Microsoft and for Microsoft for a year. They've got specialists. They've got specialist teams. And they're obviously of a turnover significantly more than 200 million. But the companies that are in that band that have enough maturity and enough financial capability and have already created their own signature in their own home market are our ideal client. The primary reason people approach us in the first place is to do with statutory governance, establishing oneself on their behalf as the Australian resident director, the Australian resident public officer, etc. And there's as much risk in us doing that, because individuals perform that role, not the company, for doing that for a day or a week as there is for doing it for a year. So there really isn't any practical financial saving for trying to only step your foot in the market for 3 months. It'll take 3 months to even get, the setup finally put into place. So that's the one thing that we find it most frustrating in trying to explain to them, because it's more like buying our roles as statutory governance is more like buying an insurance rather than a time and materials consultancy assignment. We do time and materials work for other tasks, financial accounting, legal services, etc. But we don't compromise when it comes to the stat gov roles. So that's the second one. The third one that typically comes from a North American context is how can we minimize the overtime or the number of holidays or what have you. This is a country that's grown up through a series of governments, and they have a very, very strong protection of the workforce in place across the board. It amazes the Americans constantly that the lower legal minimum is 20 days plus 8 to 10 days of statutory holiday, and typically companies are giving 25 days plus the statutory governance holidays, and then states have their own statutory governance holidays as well. We had one here last week on a Monday, and to be perfectly honest, nobody in Australia or New South Wales, it was just New South Wales and Northern Territory, knew what it was for, but it's a holiday. So that's what they don't get their head around, because especially in North America, and I grew up in North America, 2 weeks is it. The third or the fourth is whether we will take on board the assignment and amortize the costs over the course of the year. And so our answer is twofold. No, not for the statutory governance roles. That's because their risk is full and implicit from day one. We are capable of managing a payment plan or a payment program for the other types of services, whether that be finance, whether that be legal services, whether that be HR, admin, and support. But those two types of animals live in different worlds. And so we can say yes to the latter half of that in terms of monthly payments, but no in terms of the risk-based services. And finally, we go back to, can we do it cheaper? Well, we try and be as cost-effective as we can. We peg our price to the market. We're not as expensive as the Big Four, obviously. We don't have the infrastructure to require the costs of the Big Four, but we're also not just a one-man mom-and-pop shop offering to be your statutory Australian resident director. We have a team that provides services, so we like to think we're perfect priced, and we are always willing to listen to what the client can afford and then cut our cloth to meet their coat. Usually by the time they've got to us, whether it's by introduction from a trade counsellor or trade consul or a legal firm or an accountancy firm, they probably almost made their mind up to come to Australia. So their fears are not of uncertainty of market. Their fears are of the unknown, the unknown unknowns, the Donald Rumsfelds. And that probably most frequently manifests itself in terms of complexity. Complexity in terms of steps to get to market and time to get to market. And the steps to get to market are what I spoke of earlier, in that for the very small entities, you can probably do many of the things that we do yourself, but you will take longer knowing how to do them properly. And so that complexity is eliminated if you find a trusted supplier. And that complexity is because you're only going to do it once. You're only going to enter the market once, with very rare exceptions. But we've done it dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So we know where the potholes lie, and we can ensure to the best of our ability that you don't fall into them. The time to market is one that we can't absolutely control. We have it down to a fine art of how to make you get from commissioning us to start to getting a bank account within 48 hours, if at all possible. Longer steps in the process take their time, and most of those are outside of our control. The ATO is outside of our control, ASIC is outside of our control, and God knows that the banks are outside of our control. However, we do know how to do it properly so that you can get to market as swiftly as you can. If you are actually profitable within a year, you're doing very, very well. If you're a raw startup, they often say, don't expect profitability until year 2 or 3. Some of our clients haven't had profitability for 6 years. Others have remarkably and miraculously had profitability within 1 year. So give yourself the benefit of not giving yourself too much pressure, especially if you're already profitable in your home market, to make this new venture work at the same pace, within the same pace of time. We don't have the fear of Australia, in essence, as something that people come to me on the phone. It's more the previous items of time to market, complexity market, and the machinations of government. There is a nature of client that their expectation of what we are doing for them and for the money that we think is fair to charge will keep pushing the limit. And at some point you have to realize, for the company's sake, that those clients are in essence toxic to the rest of our client base. Putting the rest of our client base at risk is not something that I take on willingly. So at some points you have to take the bull by the horns and either gently or decidedly say no, as you suggest, or there are ways of saying no even if they become a client and then they need to move on. And it's rare, very, very rare. But if one has to do it, then that is saving our resources for the rest of our client base that deserve their full attention. So yes, you do have to take it. You have to stand up for not only Beachhead as a company, but Beachhead's client base, because they're all at risk if any one of our clients puts us at risk. I would recommend that if you are a company with integrity and maturity and the financial wherewithal that sort of fits our sweet spot, is make sure you find someone else that has that integrity, financial wherewithal, and maturity in supporting companies such as yourselves entering the market. Those 3 things are very important to us. We look for them in prospects. We expect and hope that you would look for them in us.
That was CJ Warrick, Beachhead Advantage, reducing time and cost for Australian growth. www.beachheadmgt.com